We are live at Studio B with your day-to-day BYU Sports play-by-play. I am Spencer Linton alongside Jaren Jordan. Let's roll out another Matich Monday with ESPN college football insider and analyst Trevor Matich. He is a national champion of college football. Trevor, welcome back to the show. I wish it were under different pretenses when it comes to how BYU performed against West Virginia, but the tape is out. Another 30-point loss, another head-scratching, lackluster performance on the road. So where do you begin to try and fix this thing after what you saw on Saturday night?
You know, there are things that can't be fixed. They just have to sort of be fought through as best as possible. You know, this was a perfect storm in a lot of ways. They had a physical game the week before at Texas, and now they go to play out West Virginia in a night game that against a physical team that's on the rise and has beaten a bunch of good teams and has given a bunch of others scares. So this West Virginia team is no joke. And BYU was very banged up on both sides, and it was just a tough place to be. So the first thing they need to do, and they've been here before and they've done well at it, the first thing they need to do is make sure to stay together as a team. You don't want fingers to be pointed. You don't want this thing to be fractured. BYU has a bright future, medium and long term, in this league. The next 3 weeks, they've got 3 extraordinarily difficult games coming up. And the most important thing for them to do is to make sure that they remain a team, that they remain committed to each other, that they have each other's backs. Then they'll do the best they can to play the best they can. But in the longer term for BYU, the most important thing they can do is stay together.
When BYU plays well at Arkansas, at home against Texas Tech, at home against Cincinnati, certainly we're talking about 2 of those 3 being on at Lavelle Edwards Stadium. BYU is 0-4 in Big 12 play on the road. Certainly at Oklahoma State, it's going to be tough, especially the way they played against the Sooners in the win. Is being home enough to feel confident that BYU will bounce back and get a win Saturday against a pretty good Iowa State team? Or are there bigger issues that may seep into home and night game?
Well, I think being home will be huge because their fans are going to support. Their fans are going to have their back, and that energy is something that this team needs right now. Will it be enough to win? No. The problem is that Iowa State is a team that has won in the Big 12 for decades in the same way that BYU has won and needs to win now in their first year in the Big 12, and that is in the margins. In other words, they need to get the hidden yards in special teams. They need to have fewer penalties, fewer mistakes in alignment, assignment, technique. They need to get that extra yard or 2 from the ball carriers. They need to make sure the opposing ball carriers are tackled securely so they can't get those extra yard or 2. They have the fewest penalties. This is what Iowa State does as well or better than anybody in the country. And when BYU is at their best, it's what BYU does as well or better than anyone in the country. So this is a fair fight against styles that are very similar from a standpoint of how they've achieved success in recent years, especially. And so, you know, BYU is going to have to tighten down those things because they've got enough injuries that they're not going to be able to go out and just out-athlete Iowa State. Iowa State and BYU are the last 2, the bottom 2 offenses in the Big 12 in terms of yards per game. But Iowa State is the top defense in the Big 12 in terms of yards per game. So BYU is going to need to win this game with brotherhood, with camaraderie, and with execution. And the fans are going to help them get the energy.
Trevor, when I was watching the game in Morgantown, and I'm 100% not blame the officials guy, but it kind of felt like the first few drives just set a really negative tone against BYU with the way that the calls were going, and BYU never really responded. Again, I'm not going to blame the officials, but is there an element to that? And if it happens, how does BYU overcome something like that when the calls are not going your way early in the game in a hostile environment and you find yourself down all of a sudden 14-zip?
It can be deflating. And I agree with you that the officials weren't the problem here. But there were a couple of plays that I just shook my head. The 2 plays that were called against BYU defenders for late hits against a sliding quarterback, those were, in my opinion, horrifically bad calls because the quarterback ran right up to the defender both times and then slid underneath them, basically. The defender didn't launch into the quarterback either time. He didn't go to hit the quarterback. He pulled the punch. he kind of leaned into him a little bit, but he was pulling the punch so he wouldn't fire into him when he saw and make a hit when he saw that the quarterback started to slide right in front of him. And I think the officials would have done a whole lot better to have identified the fact that the BYU player didn't try to make a hit. He tried to pull the hit when the quarterback got right on top of him. Because the truth of it is, if I'm a quarterback now in college football, I'm doing that every time. I'm running right up to a defender, and when he comes up to lay one into me, I'm starting to slide because I'm going to get another 15 on top of that. And so I thought that was poor. But the thing is, if you're committing penalties, and BYU had 10 of them in this game, if you're committing penalties and they're being flagged, that's on you. But when you feel like there's some key penalties at key moments that shouldn't have been called, and there were a couple of those that I think shouldn't have been called, in that kind of an environment, it's deflating, especially when you realize that you're kind of out of people to be able to overcome, negative plays that happen because of penalties. And so you realize it's going to be hard to overcome that. And that's part of the problem, I think, up there in West Virginia. BYU kind of ran out of people because of injury.
Jake Retzlaff made his first start at quarterback, going 24 of 42 for 210 yards and rushing 10 times for 26 yards. What did you make of his first start?
I thought it was great. I thought he was fearless. That's probably the biggest thing. He seemed to know what he was looking at. He didn't seem rattled. That's important, especially in a place where getting rattled is kind of easy to do. Lots of very good players and very good teams tend to get rattled at night in West Virginia. And he seemed to have everything, wired relatively tight. And that's really good for his first start at this level. I was impressed with that. It was good that he was able to run around, because you kind of need to be able to run around with the pass protection that BYU's been getting for the last couple of years at times. Now, normally BYU has been good in pass protection. They've kind of not been good the last 2 weeks, and that's been a real problem for quarterbacks. And so the fact that he's been able to run around, especially in this particular game, has been really important.
Trevor, we've been toying with the wheel of accountability, looking at all of the reasons that things went wrong in Morgantown and why BYU lost by 30 again. Where does your accountability start if you are looking to not point a finger, but just kind of explain where it needs to change and who needs to be held accountable first before we start looking at everything else?
Let me say it this way. The people that need to be held accountable need to stand up and put their hand in the air and take accountability. Because right now there's a lot of finger pointing from the fans. And they're pointing out, and we've talked a lot about the offensive line. We've talked a lot about play calling and things like that. There are things that can't be helped, the injuries. BYU has improved their depth and over the course of the last couple of years in anticipation of getting into the Big 12, but they're still not enough, and they still have had a whole lot of injuries even beyond that. I think there are some people that would do well to stand up and say, it's me. That's what needs to happen. It wouldn't do well for me to point a finger at somebody. I can say overall that this was a season more than any in recent memory where the running game needed to step up and fix a lot of problems. And the running game is the worst in the country. Statistically one of the worst. I haven't looked this week, but certainly why they even call a play that's a running play on a 4th and 2, or that could be a running play on an RPO kind of a thing, is beyond me, because the rushing attack can't function. It doesn't function at all. And there needs to be accountability there, but I'm waiting for people to stand up and take accountability is what I'm doing. But that's where it starts. If you can't run the ball, then you have to be an elite passing team. BYU has the potential to be a very good passing team, even without running the ball. If everybody's healthy, BYU is a very good passing team. But without that running game in the Big 12, they're one-dimensional and they're in trouble. And accountability needs to start with people to volunteer their accountability rather than have somebody else drag them out.
The good news is BYU is 5th worst in yards per game rushing and 8th in yards per carry. So not the worst. That is the good news of the day.
They're not good.
Yeah. Hey, let's go. Let's talk about some of the NFL guys. Notably, Taysom Hill becomes the first player since 1964. Frank Gifford, Monday Night Football, watching that growing up. with 10 passing, 10 rushing, 10 receiving touchdowns in a career. How would you summarize what he's done as an NFL player and continues to do?
Unique. I mean, it's absolutely unique, especially in this age of specialization where you've got kids, in the 7th grade up and even earlier than that. Their parents hire football coaches for them. They hire position coaches for them so they can learn how to be what they're going to be. And they tend to really excel some of these kids from the very beginning because that's what they focus on. And their people are being paid to teach them how to do it. Versatility kind of goes out the window. And I am, the fact that Taysom is so versatile is great. But I'm impressed with the Saints that they had the foresight to understand that they had a unique weapon here. And that if they tried to plug him in as a quarterback or plug him in as a tight end or plug him in as an H-back or whatever they wanted to do, he would be good at any of those positions. But to have him do all of those things in situations gives the Saints an edge over the defense. And that's where the Saints were able to use him that way. And so I love it that they gave him the opportunity to excel at what he's best at, which is to do a whole lot of things at a very high level. And the way that he represents the team, the league, and BYU with his joyfulness in the game, I think is wonderful. Because when you watch Taysom Hill play, you can't help but have a smile on your face because he's playing with a smile because he loves it so much, just like that little kid.
All right, let's stay with the quarterback theme in the NFL. And I know BYU fans were very interested to see what Jaren Hall did. Unfortunately, he leaves early in the game because of that concussion. But Trevor, up to that point, he looked pretty sharp. What'd you think of the little bit that you saw from Jaren Hall in his first NFL start?
He was decisive. I mean, he completed 5 of his 6 passes. He had a couple of nice runs. He was moving the team. It's really unfortunate that he got hurt because the start would give you, I don't want to say hope. I want to say expectation that he could continue to grow. He could continue to move the team, continue to do great things. Now, I don't know what's going to happen because Josh Dobbs came in literally, without having a practice snap and did a lot of really good things and led them to that win. So I don't know what the Vikings are going to do going forward. I do know that in his first opportunity that Jaren did everything he could with the opportunities that he had. He was very efficient. He was a leader and he moved the team. When you move the team believes in you.
Love that, Trevor. We appreciate you always calling it how it is, whether we're talking BYU and their struggles or we're talking BYU guys in the NFL.
Not the worst in the country.
So
listen, the BYU's players are playing as hard as they know how to play. I want to be very careful as a former player here. They're playing as hard as they know how to play.
Yeah, and you can only do so much when certain things are not in place. Trevor, again, we appreciate the time. I wish you many bowls of candy corn as we all try and get through this week and get to something better against Iowa State.
Oh, at least there's some hope. Halloween is just 362 candy corn shopping days away.
Thanks, Trevor.